Take a while to buffer.
Cue the
Ah,
dramatic countdown music.
yeah, dramatic countdown music. Well, now we're finally live. The buffer has finally reached and caught up, and we're currently streaming to Twitch and YouTube. So, welcome everybody to the Q&A&Critique number 97. It is currently now 2013. We're 2 minutes early, UTC, on Friday the 14th. This is the first of a 2-week session, and we have a very special guest, White Rooster Productions, who has been a titan of finished artwork here in the Beef Riders community, who has been sharing a lot of Scifi renders and work, and also competed in the splash screen competition a couple weeks back. So I've had the honor of preparing this episode for you with him about some questions about his artwork, about his techniques, and most importantly, about his short film, which is kind of like a debut today. So we're going to have a little bit of a watch party. We're going to go through the shots, the story, the background, and get to know the person behind the art. And there is a lot of art. So White Rooster Productions, how are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
I'm very happy to have you here, actually.
Glad to be here. This is exciting.
Great. So I really want to get some context. You were talking a little bit earlier, just before the session, a little bit about your background and what you've done and your sense of experience in life. So, can you tell me about your context? Where have you come from? Why are you
Oh my
here
God.
today?
I was here. I was invited. Uh, this is this is one of several skills that I've really sat down and really forced myself to learn 3D graphic art, and it's I'm a little older. I just turned 41 a couple months ago, and I have seen movies have always been kind of fascinating to me because I remember seeing movies in the 80s and just seeing like the evolution of not just animations but 3D graphic arts and effects, watching that progress always been a fascination for me. And yeah, a couple years ago I sat down. I saw an animation by Beeple. It was the Zero Day short film he did, and I was blown away because that looked so real and so good, and it was done by just some guy. Well, at the time he was, just some guy with his own personal computer using software that isn't tens of thousands of dollars. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, have we gotten to the point now where you can do this stuff on your home computer?" And I literally sat down and just started obsessing and practicing and learning everything from everything about 3D graphic effects.
And you've managed to get quite a general rounded skill set from there. Impressive.
Yeah, thank you. And what's also interesting too, I've only been doing this a couple years. I was uh, September of 2020, I think, is when I actually sat down and did my first like it was like a cube that I turned into something. The basics upon basics. Uh, and a lot of people are like, "Oh my gosh, you haven't been doing this your whole life? What the heck? What's going on? How did you get so good?" And it's I don't know, maybe it's obsession or maybe it's just the wealth of knowledge that's out there and just going out and searching for it, breaking things down, like splitting it down into its individual components and learning each one of those basic steps. Um, yeah, that's
Okay. So,
that's the background on
with
that.
this, that's the background. So, what do you do currently right now? What's your current vocation
I'm
and your
a
current work that you do?
I'm a software engineer. So little backstory. I have a lot of history and experience in mechanics and production. So I've got a lot of experience working on cars. I have a lot of experience working in a like factory style environment, and that life, that career, you're not. There's nothing wrong with a blue collar worker, but there's aspirations. I'd like to go somewhere, and it becomes a point where these careers no longer challenge me mentally. Of course, they'll challenge you physically. I worked at a refinery, and we're talking 100-degree heat. We're talking below zero Fahrenheit temperatures in blizzard and snow. Having to do this job, this physically tasking job. So a lot of these jobs, they would challenge me physically, but I never had a career that challenged me mentally. So when COVID happened, I got laid off from my job, of course. A lot of people did,
Oh
about
man.
25% of the country did. And I got another job, just painting airplane engines or something like that. I got laid off from that job, two jobs in 1 year because a lot of these businesses were shutting down. So I decided to sit down. It's like, okay, I have I have plenty of time. I had money saved. I really want to invest into a career that is going to challenge me mentally. So I sat down and I have some experience in computer programming. I actually graduated with a degree in computer programming, but it was like 2003 when I graduated. So I had a lot of catching up to do. And then at the same time, I also learned 3D graphic arts. So I ended up getting a job. I got my certifications updated. I was very fortunate. I met somebody whose car I worked on years ago who introduced me to somebody who was also into cars. But then, yeah, he has a business designing software that is used by the government, and he offered me a job and sponsored my education, sponsored my certifications, and now I work for him. And I finally, for the first time in my life, have a job that doesn't challenge me physically anymore. It's challenging me mentally, and it's absolutely rewarding. That's the thing I love the most about my job is taking on these tasks which are seemingly impossible or difficult or just something beyond any kind of understanding, about a lot beyond a lot of people's understanding, and really sitting down and figuring that out. How do I do this? Um, and the 3D graphic art has been another one of those. While it's not something I do for money, it's something I do for fun, but it's another one of these things that gives me the opportunity to really challenge my mind and really sit down and focus and learn something new every single day. We could talk about, the satisfaction or brain chemical dopamine.
Yeah.
Your dopamine is one of your brain chemicals where when you achieve something, right, you feel good. Like, hey, I did this thing, I accomplished this task, and now you get this feeling. And ever since I was young, I've always been obsessed with learning, figuring out how do things work, everything. Like my parents have invested a lot of the toys I would get would be like Legos or models, stuff I could build, stuff I could take apart, put back together, and really learn how figure out the fundamentals. How does this work? And that's something to this day, even as an adult, that's a motivational that's my purpose is to learn. I always want to grow. I always want to learn new things. And this is one of those things. This is a hobby that challenges me mentally and also taps into another part of my brain I didn't realize I had, which is, we'll call it the if you think about psychology, your A type of personality is somebody who's logical, your B
Hmm.
type personality is somebody who's artistic. And I seem to have logical characteristics and artistic capabilities. So this really touched a part of my brain that I didn't even realize I had. And that is, the artistic side.
Beautiful. Yeah, you've really squeezed the juice out of the hobby right now, and the sense of creativity and your ingenuity making these things work.
No, thank you.
So when it comes, I've been taking a closer look at some of your pieces here. You've published a lot of them here on the
Notice you
server.
grabbed all the Star Trek ones.
That's the most recent ones. I have a couple of your
Well, yeah.
cities as well. A couple of
Well,
your hard surface ones about Borg. But your most recent pieces, I mean, most recent, almost 20 pieces. They've been
yeah,
quite good. But I wanted to ask you, what got you into the sci-fi streak? I know you've had the factory background. I've also worked in a couple of factories too, so I know that feeling. I also know the inspiration from Legos and the education from parents and family, and starting off with some physical labor and then wanting to get into the arts. But what pushed you down this road of science fiction and hard surface modeling and realistic rendering?
I've always been into just sci-fi, like the types of movies I enjoy, the types of books I enjoy, everything sci-fi. Something about this technology or this future, these positive futures to look forward to. That has always been something. Even when I was a kid, it's just been just something that's always fascinated me, and that's where my mind goes. Even when I was a kid, we would play. You could play cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians, whatever. That was fun, whatnot. Some people were really into sports. I've never really been very athletic, but I have always been very imaginative, thinking about this future of technology and where we can go and the things we can do with the technology, how the technology can make our lives better. Uh, even some of the more darker movies. You think about like Oblivion, for example, where humanity, the aliens came, took over the world, and humanity's kind of been enslaved, and now here we're fighting to get out of it. Something like that. Even sci-fi movies aren't just about just technology. They seem to have this accompanying story about using this technology to better ourselves and do better. And that's where a lot of um, things like Star Trek come from. Even Star Wars even has that. Now it's just a story
Yeah.
about a family, but it's also about this is the technology they have to explore the galaxy, and you can still have this lifelike story with this tech.
And also
It's always been
geopolitics, religion. Yeah, also has a lot of
yeah.
those concepts
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
life technology is just a tool of life, and that's always been a fascination of mine. Um, yeah,
So,
that's where most of my stuff is focused on sci-fi. You don't see me doing a lot of abstract stuff. That's actually one of the reasons why I'm fascinated with you, Dre's, is you do a lot of abstract stuff. I'm full retard. I don't get it. I do not get any of the abstract. We had you had that one guy on the other day. He made that shader where like the shadows were blue and the light source was red. That was just fascinating to me. Never would have thought of something like that. I'm very, very obsessed with photorealism and detail. And is this something tangible? Is this something real? I can model. I modeled my computer, the GPU, the motherboard, like all the individual components, because that's something real. That's something in real life, and I'm very good at that kind of stuff. But you want me to make some kind of abstract art of a GPU? I don't. No, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
that's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, for
I,
real.
I have done realistic rendering before, and I've worked with it, but I also have trouble trying to hit the light, trying to hit the shading and the realistic color balancing and the atmosphere, which you really do quite well. The lens effects. I understand the theory, but I have a lot of difficulty hitting that, and vice versa. So I understand where you're coming from. Someone told
That's
me to make,
fascinating.
someone made,
Yeah,
yeah, make a
sure.
GPU. And it's like a realistic GPU or a
Yeah, it's a
rendition of a
realistic.
GPU.
Yeah, it's a realistic GPU. Yeah, it has lights on it. It looks exactly like the GPU that's in my computer. I pulled the GPU out. I measured it. In fact, a lot of the textures are I cheated. I just took pictures of it, and that's what I used to texture it. But yeah, I don't think there's any examples of that. It's on my ArtStation. I was going to build myself a computer case, which is why I had the motherboard and equipment set up, and I had the GPUs. I wanted to make a 4 GPU server, but there was no such thing as a case that would house it properly, I should say, where I wanted everything air cooled and not bumped up against each other. So I started designing a custom computer case. So I modeled all the individual components. I was going to do like cables that were all custom length. Keep scrolling. Yeah, see, there you go. Those GPUs are right next to it. That
Yeah,
image right there.
beautiful. Yeah, I see it all. Let's load them up. There
Yeah,
you got the
those are the fans.
fans. Beautiful topology, high density, nicely subdivided. And right at RTX 3090.
That was my first real hard surface model. I don't enjoy modeling. I've actually I just recently that one enterprise model I think is going to be my last model. It's not something I enjoy. There's people out there that are way more skilled at it, way better at it. I like texturing. I like bringing something to life, putting it in there, compositing. The later stages of the process, should we say, I seem to enjoy a lot more. But yeah, the I have done modeling. It's just not something I super duper enjoy. And even too, like you can look up close. It's not perfect. There's if you have one of them in real life, you could see a lot of the things I couldn't quite figure out, like the what hexagon pattern on the top, for example, was
Mm,
something I could never get right. Yeah, that motherboard is all textured with just an image of my motherboard. You know what I mean? There's nothing super fancy about that. But yeah, that's parts of my computer right there.
that's beautiful. I remember when I was trying to learn how to do 3D, making my own keyboard and mouse and monitor as well, because it's the only thing I had as a reference in my mind in 3D
Right.
space.
Yeah. 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 Exactly.
It didn't come out
Yeah.
even half as good as these, though. These are incredible.
Well, Blender is incredibly good for um, modeling and texturing. Very, very good at that. It's also a fantastic light path render engine. It has Blender, they try to be, you know, a do all type of thing, and there's limitations to that. It's not the program that you know, there's some things you can do in other applications better, but Blender is just so good for modeling and texturing. It's so there with basic instructions and sources like blendersecrets.org, for example. Have you, I don't know if you've ever seen his videos. He has these little 1 minute clips, just a whole bunch of them, talking about just some very basic fundamental. That guy, I bought his manual, but I feel like I still owe him more money because of the value of the knowledge I've learned from that manual, just these concepts of modeling and texturing. Just absolutely fascinating. And this guy, he puts it out there on the internet for free. You know, this is it's amazing. The value of the knowledge there, that it's just free. And he has this thing of, okay, if you want to support me, buy my book, here you go. Uh, but pay me what you think I'm worth, that type of deal. He does not do it for money. He absolutely does it for the sake of sharing knowledge. And I have a lot of respect for people like that. Um, yeah. Yeah, highly recommend that source right there for if you want to learn modeling.
I think that's a good choice of books. I would love to interview him one day. Jan, I think is his name.
I've never spoken to him. He's never. Some people say they don't respond to, you send him messages, especially when you're like, yeah, just hey man, this is what I did. Thank you for that tutorial. Here you go, and yeah, no response. But you know, some people are just not social, or maybe he's busy. Who knows?
Yeah, it's also another thing that happens every now and then. Some of these pieces are very nice. I got to add them to my collection. You have so much work. All right, so I
That
want
I
to
can't.
talk a little bit about the how with these pieces. You mentioned that
Yeah.
you've got the
So that
analytical brain and you've got the sci-fi inclination of the story and the implication. You've got the real world grounding and the logical process of learning how to do something. So, for example, this particular piece here, what
yeah.
is your workflow? How did you get into it?
So that is an add-on by Chip Walters called Simple Sci-Fi. And when he first released that, and by the way, I did not model any of that stuff. That is when you buy his add-on, his Simple Sci-Fi add-on, that is one of the packs that you get with it. And it was I think it had just come out. And I was one of the first people to download it and really start tinkering with it and playing with it. I just followed his instructions. And then he really liked my stuff. He has since made another version of this. Is basically just a scattering add-on. You know what I mean? Using geometry nodes when it first came out. He's since then, the biggest limitation with this was if you look real close, a lot of these objects that are scattered are overlapping each other, and it
Right
doesn't
here.
really, you know, there was really no good way with geometry nodes at that time to scatter objects and not really have control over where they are. Specifically, it doesn't make any sense to have a pipe coming up some random little spot there. Um, so that was one of the limitations of his add-on. He just recently made a new add-on called Spock, which takes it to the next level. It finally addressed that issue, and it also gave you a lot more control. When you scatter that is and realize those instances, that's how it is. So when he was working on the new add-on Spock, again with here's some assets you get with it. Follow the instructions. He invited me to be one of his beta testers before he released it to the public, and he wanted me to do some artwork using his add-on to advertise his product. I thought that was really cool, really awesome. I get that he invited me for that. But yeah, that's how that's done. That was literally you follow the instructions, and then the rest is a matter of, you know, of course, having a good lighting. Good lighting is everything in your renders. And there's so many tutorials out there about lighting. But the thing of it is, and that one render in the upper corner there, Dre's, there what the thing about that render there, and this is becoming a style choice of mine. It's even kind of controversial, and some people critique me for it. They don't like that. There's everybody talks about lighting, and you know, you've got your key lighting, you've got your rim lighting, dozens and hours of tutorials out there about how to light something. Nobody talks about shadows. And this is something I've come to really like and
Hmm.
enjoy, is shadows seem to play every bit as important of a role as lighting. Like, on the left-hand side of that picture, that is a column. You can't see the details of it. It's all in shadows. But
Mm-hmm.
why do you see it? Why do you know what that is? You know what it is because the silhouette, the lighting behind it, outlines that object. Now, the texturing isn't very good, but you can hide that in the shadows. And that's kind of how I've discovered contrast. And this right around the time I started doing these types of renders is when I've come to realize this. Shadows play every bit as important to making your bringing your renders to another level as lighting. Because if you have too much lighting, if things are lit too well or too perfectly, they end up looking very flat, very fake. And you
Mm.
also brings out a lot of your faulty details of your model or of your texturing, and you can hide that in the shadows and still have a great composition. The texturing that's there is just the default random little scattering texturing that Chip included with that add-on, but it looks good in this instance because a lot of you can't see a lot of the details of that. They're hidden in the shadows, and that has been just as fundamental thing in all of my renders since then is composition with shadows. Some people like it, some people don't. A lot of people criticize me, saying, "Oh, this is too dark. I can't see what's going on." Okay, whatever. That's a style choice that I seem to be making and drawing more towards. Um, Volumetrics, of course, play another great role. I'm still working out the details of that. That right there is a VDB. That you can hide things with volumetrics as well as shadows, or you can hide detail with volumetrics where the light is scattered. You don't quite see every little bit of detail as it is. And if you think about it, that's how real life is too, by the way. You
Mm-hmm.
don't see objects, right? You don't see objects.
You see
You see
shapes
light.
and light.
You see lights reflecting off objects. And that's a very, very key thing. You're not, sometimes it's not so much like that bridge or whatever is not, it's a very basic shape, but you see the light, you know what it is because of the light reflecting off of it. And if you can scatter that light or hide some of that light, you can hide the detail that would show it being a render. Because the biggest problem with renders is when things look too perfect. Well, this when things are too perfect, you see something, you don't you see the detail of it, you see that it's just a render because it is too perfect. But if you can do these things that real life does, put in a shadow or scatter the light with volumetrics, you can take it to that next level.
Yeah, that is really pretty. I was starting to see like some of your earlier work. You started to experiment with that idea of casting, using light sparingly to bounce it off
Hmm.
and bring out detail and throw in your volumetrics. I
Yep,
noticed with this particular piece, for example, the volumetric seems like a procedural shader instead of a actual
it is.
VDB.
Yeah, yeah, and actually so is that landscape. And by the way, Dre's, that landscape is the exact same model, should we say, that I used for the nebula that you have for the cover art for this
Ooh,
show.
this one here.
Yeah, it's the exact same nodes. And it's interesting you picked that piece because I almost didn't release it. I didn't like it. I got it done and I'm like, yeah, I was going to delete it. I wasn't even going to share it at all because the nebula, shall we say, that's what it is. I've repurposed it. The nebula, it doesn't look like a nebula. Nebulas don't have pointy clouds or anything like that. You could tell it's this Musgrave texture made in Blender. But why does it look good? The shadows and the lighting, right? The
Yeah,
contrast. You don't see the details of it. You don't see every detail. And of course, I've blurred it out a lot with some Photoshop magic, some overlays and whatnot to really kind of distort it and kind of take away from that fakiness. But that's the exact same thing. Like that's what that was originally. I repurposed that exact plane with those exact nodes to make that exact render.
that's very recursive, resourceful of you. Because it works. I see the stars through it, the lighting. I mean, it's a believable concept. I mean, I don't. In some regards, we don't even know what a nebula really looks like unless we've been staring through telescopes and looking at Hubble photographs for a very long time. But to
You
me,
want to
it
hear
looked
something
good.
You want to hear something funny? Like
Yeah.
when people ask, like, how do you make a photorealistic nebula? It's like, uh, you can't see it.
Yeah.
And people are like, what? What do you mean? You just go on NASA, there's pictures. Well, no, that's not what it really looks like in real life. Go out and look at the sun. Do you see all the rays, the magnetic field of the sun? No, all you see is glare. That is a photorealistic sun, just the big bright thing you can't even look at. It'll damage your eyes, right? So there's this strange kind of um what's the word I'm looking for here? There's this um dramatic style. Help me out here. Going back to the stylized type of thing versus reality. This dreamy, beautiful kind of concept of reality to make it look better, and so then it becomes very subjective because a lot of the NASA images, those are AI, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That
I
still looks
dabbled with AI a little bit.
it looks kind of
That's
cool
all.
though.
Yeah. But, that's uh, but again, that is a person's perception, very stylized view of a nebula. Oh, it's an AI version of a nebula, but the same type of deal. Every single one of these pieces here are very stylized. They're not realistic. These things, even if they did exist in real life, you don't go up and look at them in the sky and see that stuff. You need to have a camera that's able to modify the light in a way that it makes to show that to make sense. So photorealism, versus stylized, realism, should we say, when it comes to sci-fi, is that looks better than reality.
All right. So we have a question actually concerning the
Yeah.
workflow by Plebes. He's asked, "Your work looks great. May I ask, how is your post-processing and compositing workflow?" So we've had a look at like you've been using models that other people have been working on, scattering systems. You focus on the shaders. You focus on the lighting and composition with the shadows and the contrast, putting things in the dark. You're using volumetrics. You're using light in a selected way to bring out silhouette, to bring out shape and form. But another thing that I noticed is your compositing workflow is on point with your lenses and your types of like delicate touches. You've mentioned you use Photoshop and others. What is your workflow when it comes to compositing and post processing?
A lot of these Star Trek renders are we'll call it my new way of compositing, where I'm actually not using Blender. I was really obsessed with this whole I'm going to do everything in Blender, and when I hit render, I'm going to get my final piece, and that's what's going to look good. That's what I'm going to get. And Blender is very inefficient, so you need to spend a lot of money on the most expensive, best hardware you can buy just to do something similar to that, and it still doesn't look right. It still comes out looking very fake. So my what ended up happening is like the those are all done in Photoshop. I export. So, but those, by the way, weren't modeled together. I had a general idea, like I modeled that nebula, I rendered that nebula, I rendered that ship, and then I'm like, okay, how can I put these together? And then I went back into the render for the ship and put a bunch of lights down where I thought would make sense with that as the background. In fact, I even saved the background as its own JPEG and put it in the actual background of the render and set it to emit that light so the colors and everything would be correct.
Hmm.
So basically my workflow now, the way it used to be is everything was done in Blender, Blender's compositor, everything was Blender. In fact, the simple sci-fi stuff was all done in Blender. The stuff I did for Chip Walters, that was all in Blender. But then I should say met, I found a gentleman by the name of Christopher Fraser, and he showed you can export from Blender a series of pictures of paths where Blender's biggest, like greatest add-on was when they introduced light paths and your ability to do light groups. So I do not use what comes out of Blender straight. The combined RGB whatever. I don't use that anymore. So most of these are a series of sun lamps. Usually 5, 6, 7 sun lamps, and every single sun and the world, by the way, is saved as its own individual light path. And when you look at these things individually, all you see is just that one light source and the light reflecting off that object. So remember what I said, you don't see objects, you see light reflecting off objects. So he showed, and he uses Nuke, he doesn't use Photoshop, but he showed, yeah, what you do is you save every single one of these light sources as a light group, you name it,
Mm-hmm.
export it as a multi-layer EXR, and then you can import that EXR file into another piece of software to composite it and combine it and put it together. So like all the individual lights and everything on that ship, the windows are one light group. The blue part of the engines are another light group. The orange engine is another light group. The buzzards, the red buzzards, are another light group. I have 17 to 100 layers that I have control over. And by doing it like that, plus the world, by the way, the world is its own emissive object, and I export that. So I delete the sRGB combined. I don't even use Blender's compositor anymore. There's a lot of limitations to it. It's very slow. Whereas using something like Photoshop, and I am going to get into Nuke eventually, but using something like Photoshop, I can it's very quick and very efficient. I sit there, I throw it down, and I sit there and I play with sliders and I adjust numbers, and I get instant feedback. Whereas with Blender, that was the biggest problem with Blender. When some of my node groups look like Sam's planet shaders, we're talking 150 nodes, and it would sit there and you'd make one tiny adjustment, you'd be sitting there waiting. And I have a $2,500 CPU, 32 core CPU. It would take Blender's compositor like 30 seconds for it to register that one change, and you start to get very dis unmotivated sitting there waiting for the thing to figure itself out. So I started using Photoshop, and I'm going to get into Nuke here in the near future because it was quick. I can combine these together. I can change the color. I don't even, by the way, all my light sources are white.
Just
I
curious.
don't export anything in color anymore. Everything is white. And then in Photoshop, I will multiply it by a color to change the color of it. So I have that much more finer control. The windows, one of the things to one of the fundamentals of compositing is using black body lights. Lights that are actual, like the real actual color that real actual lights emit in the real world, called a black body. It's measured in the Kelvin scale. 2,000 to 12,000 is typically what we see. It's like a blue to a yellow. All the lighting for the windows is an actual black body color. That type of detail. And I have that control because I export it as a group, as its own light group, um, as white. Because anything times white is whatever you're going to get.
Wow.
So if you export it as a color, you're going to have a little bit harder, more difficult of a time trying to change that color. And Chris Fraser gets into, like, he'll export like the direct lighting, the indirect lighting. He puts a lot more detail that I haven't really gotten into. All I do is just light groups, and that's it. That is all I do. So what you're seeing here with all my stuff is, um, breaking this down, I will generally make a background. Sometimes I'll start with the ship. So like that one there, that one. So that the movie Star Trek Generations, where the Enterprise comes up to the space station, it had that yellow. I use that as my reference image. So I didn't know what my background was going to be. In this instance, I started off with setting up the camera angle to match my reference, setting up the light source to match the reference, right? And then I brought it into Photoshop and I made a background to fit that. So in this instance, I didn't even know what my background was going to be. I had a ship perspective. If you think about it, a lot of these are like elements or even different characters. Like the sun there in the background is its own, we'll call it a character. That was its own element. There was a lot of things I put into for that one render, for that one element. The ship is another element. It's its own character, it's its own thing. These were
Hmm.
actual separate blend files that were then put together in Photoshop. So I have this very 3D to 2D process where I have a lot of these 3D elements, a lot of 3D elements, a lot of renders of this huge asset library of stuff I've learned over the years. Particles, stars, nebulas, planets, textures to make planets. These are all the 3D aspect of it. I then export that, import it into Blender in the 2D world, and put it all together. And I would really like to get into Nuke to take that 3D to 2D, and then back to 3D. Bring it back to life. The next stage is do a little animation with this. There's a little 3-second animation of just the ship moving very slightly or something like that. 3D to 2D. All my stuff, a lot of the stuff, I can sit here and I can draw on the canvas. I can draw the lines and everything. But how do I do that in a 3D workflow? That becomes a different type of challenge versus just drawing it. So that's the next step, is 3D to 2D to 3D.
to 3D again and working your lights, coloring them based on black body,
Hmm.
tuning your lights, each one individually based on the different angles. You said you had 5 sunlamps or so, and then you work from there.
Yeah. Yep. And then you
Fascinating.
can you can animate that light source, for example, like let's say it's a pulsar and your light source is going to look like a strobe or like something on top of a lighthouse. You can animate that light source. But then I'll have the ability to control the color. I'll have the ability to control the intensity of it. That's another thing too. I used to sit there and I used to fine tune, sunlight of power 10, sunlight of power point 0.1. I used to do that. Now I just do everything as like sunlight power 5, and then I'll reduce the exposure of that light source to help me get the coloring and the contrast that I want.
Yeah, sometimes it's nice to tune down from a strong light, then boost up.
Mm.
Yeah, where the lights are clipped already because there's just not enough power. Interesting. So I have a
If you think
question
about
for
it,
you actually. We've been talking here in the chat here about the new compositor in Blender with the real-time shader nodes, and with the light groups is relatively new. I think it came out in 3.5, 1 or 5? Yeah, 3.5. And now we have the real-time compositor, which they have been integrating into the actual compositor nodes so that you can process EXR as almost real-time now. I wanted to ask you, have you tried that out? And if so, why isn't it on your radar? What do you think is it missing?
so when I did try it out, it came back to the exact same, whether you render it out and composite it or whether you see what your compositor is before you render. It's still the same limitation of Blender, where a lot of my nodes groups, like a lot, I should show you like the one I did for the simple sci-fi. There's literally, or even just the one with the Lego robot. There's 150 nodes in that compositor, in Blender's compositor that was all done in Blender. And that's because I'm loading in these textures as its own thing. So if I have a 6K, 8K, 12K, 24K texture, that's more RAM and more processing power needed to compute that. Um, Blender's real-time compositor didn't seem to have as many available nodes as the actual compositor. Like they're still integrating all of them. They weren't all there, but it was still the exact same problem with the inefficiency. It's I'm too impatient. I'm too impatient to sit there and wait for it to process it. Let's talk about Octane real quick. So I've played a
Ooh.
lot with Octane for Blender. And the reason why I bring this up is I came to realize something about Octane, why it is so popular. It's Octane is essentially gives you a compositor, a very good compositor that is almost real time with your render before you even hit render. And the thing about that is a lot of that stuff, it's cool, you know what I mean? You can, again, you can hit render, but what does the actual raw image look like? What if you don't like the bokeh that it makes? What if you don't like the color of the bokeh it makes? What if you don't like the grain or whatever? There's a lot of finer controls that you don't have with a lot of the compositors, and that's another big limitation with Blender's compositor is there's a lot of there's finer controls you just do not have. If you could open up those nodes, like the blur node, for example, or the glare node, actually, there's only a few options you have with Blender's default glare node. The ghost node portion of it is not very good, but you in something like Nuke or Photoshop, you can the individual pieces that make that up, you would have that finer and finer control. Um, so that's why I don't use Blender's compositor. Is it just there's a lot of limitations to it. There's more things I would like to do that it just doesn't give me the capability of doing, and it's very inefficient at what it does do. And having it real time cool is one thing, but often my brain isn't thinking too much of the end product. I'm focused on the camera angle. How does the model look? How is, where's the light going to come from? That kind of stuff, the compositing, how does it look like when it's done? That comes later. If you're able to focus on those finer details, like is am I going to have something that overlaps? Do I have something that's going to come out of this and look like it's growing an antenna or something like that? That's the type of stuff you should be focusing on. And I've discovered if you break that apart and you really hyper focus on those finer details, the compositor comes later. You can hyper focus on that later, but more importantly, you need to work on the layout and work on the texturing. You need to work on the light source itself. You can pretty it up later. There's a concept in modeling called big, medium, and small.
Hmm.
And this was another one of those fundamental principles of modeling that really kind of apply to everything. You can't, when you lay out your scene, you're not seeing all the medium or small details. You're laying out the big pieces. Where does this big building go? Where does that piece go? And then you start adding more and more detail to it. Compositor is one of those, we'll call it smaller details. You really shouldn't be focusing on the smaller, finer details until you have the layout, the bigger details set up how you like. And that's why I don't really. That's even why I've gotten away from Blender. Blender at this point is now a model, texture, and light path engine, and nothing else. And now I use other software for the finer details beyond that.
I'm curious. Yeah, I've always spent too much time doing compositing with renders, and with animation, if I'm rendering multiple passes per shot, I'd be getting hundreds of gigs of render passes and EXR data to then composite the hundreds of gigs back together again. Because it's not just one frame, I have thousands, tens of thousands,
Right.
hundreds of
Yeah,
thousands of
every
frames
one of those
sometimes.
frames has so much detail with it. Yeah, I'm in the process right now. My next video that's actually going to go on my channel. I've been doing PC build videos. My next PC, quote unquote, that I'm building is actually a server, a NAS server storage, because I've run out of hard drive spaces on both my computers. I need more storage because my process of doing these that a lot of these Star Trek renders are 3-4 gigs, just the Photoshop files. Just the Photoshop file is 3-4 gigs. Imagine the EXR. These are 4K resolution with 20, 30, 40, 100 passes in them. They're huge, astronomically huge. And I'm running out of hard drive space.
Yeah, and you'll
Um,
need something fast as well to load it up quick.
mhm. Sometimes too, you change your mind. Like my latest render had a big glowing nebula in it. I took it out. I was like tried 6 7 times, quote unquote final composite. I didn't like it. I took it out, but I had that ability. I had the ability to take that out, so it worked out in the end. I was able to kind of, where is it? Do you have? Yeah, you do have it there.
Which one?
The lower right hand of that small group you got, that one right there, that one I just released, that had this huge bright nebula right where the on the right hand side. I took it out, but I had that ability. I didn't like the way it looked, and I wasn't going to go back to square one, but I had the ability to take it out and kind of put something simpler in there, just light rays. I need to work on simplifying. Uh, there's a certain more is less, or less is more, I should say, and I get too hyper focused in detail sometimes. I try to put too much in there. The render right next to it looks nice, right? There's a lot of detail in there. In fact, that light source doesn't make any sense. If you think about it, you shouldn't be seeing the reflection off the top of the ship. That is way off in the distance. The light source of that should only be hitting the rim. So, you know, I kind of ruined that there. I ruined that photorealism because that light source doesn't make any sense with that particular setup. You wouldn't see the light source for that. You wouldn't see it at all in
Right.
real life.
There was one piece that you mentioned earlier in the chat that you were feeling getting out of your comfort zone with this particular piece. Can you explain to me
Mhm.
why?
That's that abstract art thing we were talking about. I had seen some cover art like from some of the older Star Trek movies. There was one where it was like a top down view, just like what you're seeing with some lines coming through, and I'm like, I think I can make that. And I have these models, and I know how to make those lines. Let me see if I can try something abstract. And I worked on that for 3 days. 3 days, and I'm still like, when I put it out there, I was like kind of uncertain. But I got an overwhelming amount of positive feedback from it. I was like, oh wow, I took on that challenge. I got out of something. I got away from the photorealism. I tried something abstract, and the feedback I'm getting from it is very positive. I'm real happy about that. That almost didn't get shown because
Almost didn't get shown.
I didn't have any certainty that I'd get any positive feedback from it.
Well, it's very brave of you to put it out there anyway. Is there a percentage of your work that nobody ever gets to see? Or do you take a lot of risks?
There's I share it with a small group of people. I share everything basically on Sam's server, Sam Krug, by the way. Check
Nice
out
hair.
his YouTube channel. You want to learn how to do serious space renders, realistic planets, realistic suns. check out Sam Krug. I share everything on his channel,
Yeah, I've
and I
interviewed him
shared.
here before as well. It's kind of
Yes,
nice.
yes. Actually, that's how I met you. As a matter of fact, I met
Nice.
you when you interviewed him. That was the very first time I ever came onto your server. Was for his interview. Um,
It's very nice.
Whoa, I already lost my train of thought. Crap. So we were talking about where was I going? Crap.
Don't
I
worry.
did it very
Okay, don't worry.
directly.
Okay, so I have another question to bring you back onto the rails. So you
Sure.
mentioned this is a pretty powerful hobby. You've got hundreds of passes into files that are really big, rendering out in different layers, setting up your scene just to get them composited for later. And you also have your other work on the side here. So I wanted to ask you, you have a very strong finesse and attention to detail with the large, medium, small hierarchies, which I find to be quite clever, and also your touch on color and the elements with the sci-fi that you want to express, which someone mentioned earlier is kind of cool because the way that you're rendering your sci-fi is almost neutral. It's not dystopic, it's not utopic. It's kind of, it could be this, it could be that. And that's kind of a nice thing to think about. But with all this work that you do, how do you balance yourself? You've
I
mentioned
don't.
you don't.
I don't sleep. For real. I probably get 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. Um, I work a full-time job. That's 40 hours at the bare minimum. I have in real life, I have a farm. Like the White Rooster was an actual pet. He was a rooster that I raised from an egg. I have 2 horses, 3 dogs, cats, a whole farm. We have fruits, vegetables we grow here. Um, and then I said, this is another huge time consuming hobby. There are times where my girlfriend's like, come out of your office, come on out, let's go grocery shopping. I am, um, there's priorities in life, right? So the need to earn money is one priority. The need to take care of, we'll call them my children, my pets, my animals. That's the taking care of my family is my number one priority. That I will stop anything for to go do. My second priority is my job, making sure I have my financial income, completing my job tasks. All the other time beyond that, I can put into this, for example. It is not uncommon for me to 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I got to get up for work at, 7:30. That's when I'll finally finish a piece. I've really sacrificed a lot of sleep for the sake of learning and building a skill. Um, and I don't know, maybe one day that'll catch up to me. But yeah, everything in life is priorities. If I have a customer project, I've just recently starting people are paying me to do stuff for them. So then they'll take a priority, of course, over my personal stuff. I'll put my personal stuff away and focus on what they want, on their needs, getting that job done. Uh, yeah, everything in life when it comes, we all have the same 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
We may not all have the same years, right? I mean, we don't all live the exact same number of days, but we all have the exact same 24 hours, and everything in life is a priority. And it comes down to when it comes time management is a reflection of how you prioritize what's important to you in life. Um, so, fortunately, taking care of my animals, it doesn't hog up 8 hours.
Hey.
uh, you know what I mean? So I'm grateful that, I have 24 hours. I'm able to focus. I can sit down if I have nothing more pressing. I am able to sit down for 5, 6 hours straight and really hyper focus and do something. But then also, too, I've learned the value of stopping, taking a break, walking away, maybe come back to it the next day, maybe come back to it 3 days later, come back to it a year later. I have really learned the value of also stopping because what ends up happening is sometimes you get too hyper focused in your details. Sometimes you need a fresh brain. And it's amazing the creativity and the ideas you can come up with taking a break, walking away, clearing your head, do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that is another huge, key, valuable thing. Um, Time management, priorities.
Okay, which leads me to my next question. When it comes to, like, here you have a large quantity of work, but also a very large quality of work. When it comes to the things that you have to do, you have quite a high quantity of things to keep in mind with your time management and your sense of priority. So how do you balance between quantity of things to do and the quality of the things that you're doing?
I'm going to talk about Beeple real quick. Beeple was real big about the whole everyday thing. Sit down and force yourself to make something, finish something, doesn't matter quantity. Every day, make something, do this. But if you look at his stuff, he's really de-evolved. If you look at the stuff he did back in 2017, 2016, that was fascinating, beautiful stuff. Now he's got these everydays that just don't make any sense. When I was learning how to race a car, like specifically an autocross, I have a lot of seat time. It was not about doing the same. What would happen is you would do something and it would work, and you would keep doing that one thing over and over and over and over again. You see that in Beeple's artwork too, by the way. A lot of his stuff is kind of the same assets, just thrown together in some weird way. Quantity is just your ability to do something over and over again. You don't put a whole lot of thought into it. You don't develop that any further. If you can really, you go when I in a car, when you go around the same corner, if you do the exact same thing, you're going to get the exact same result. How are you going to learn and improve your time? Maybe there's a millisecond that could be saved by braking a little later, by turning a little sharper, or maybe turning less sharp. You cannot do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. You're not going to learn, you're not going to grow, and you end up burning yourself out. You get very demotivated when you don't learn. The key I've discovered, the key into happiness, it's not money, it's not um, it's not what you have. It's growing, learning, and giving, sharing, helping people. Those are the two most fulfilling things in life you can do. You will never grow, you will never learn by doing the same thing over and over again. You will grow and learn. I can sit down and pick up one of these projects and redo it. Maybe tweak a detail, tweak a color. In fact, there was one Starship one I picked up. It's the same model, almost the same camera, and I changed the background. I changed the colors of it. I slightly tweaked the light sources. Don't be afraid to go back and redo work. That one right there you had just grabbed. There's 3, 4 different versions of that one. The feedback I got from the first one wasn't too good. I went back and I changed it. I redid it. Same nebula, same model, redid it. Took the feedback that I got. Don't. And by the way, when it comes to feedback, everyone's going to have an opinion. Most opinions may not be good, but that's constructive criticism. So, I remember what we were going to talk about earlier with Sam's server. I love Sam's server because I can post my stuff and I will get genuine, constructive criticism. This is good. This isn't. This is what you can improve on. This doesn't quite look right. And you can't have the ego. You can't be, mad that somebody doesn't look at your stuff and give you the praise you think you deserve because you put the work in. You got to take that. Look, why are they saying that? How could I improve that? How could I get to there? Sam has a lot of incredibly talented people on his server, more talented than me. And I've been able to learn a lot just from the constructive criticism and the feedback I get, positive and negative. So quality is satisfaction. You are going to achieve, you're going to learn, you're going to grow by doing quality work, not quantity of work. Don't be set on some deadline, on some time. I have to get this done right now. Don't do that to yourself. You put yourself under made up pressure, and then you demotivate yourself. And when you don't complete it, you don't pick it up and you don't want to do it again because you failed last time. And that kind of brings us into the short film,
That's
which I
right.
think there's an example right there of me putting a lot of pressure on myself to do something faster, more efficient, skipping a lot of steps and not being satisfied. And it's been hard. I stopped working on that in January. I haven't touched it since. And my boss made a very interesting point. I told him why I stopped. And he's like, "No, go back and finish it. You're almost done." Because he's like, "If you do not go back and finish it, you will never pick up a project like that again because you didn't get the result. You didn't get the satisfaction
You
from it,
didn't
should we say.
finish
You didn't
it.
achieve it." And he's absolutely right. And I haven't gotten back. I keep coming up with excuses to avoid getting back into this. That's uh, because I'm stuck.
Okay.
And that was
So this
that's
leads up to we're nearing an hour. So I would like to ask you, can we watch this together? And I know it's
yeah,
not finished yet, but
yeah,
you had some questions about this, and I
yeah.
also had a quick look onto it. I also had a little bit of feedback, since this is a Q&A and critique. So let's not burn more time, and let's go through watch this video, and let's see what your questions are about it. So let me just change my screen. You guys can hear it on Discord. And let me just make sure I'm not muted on the stream online. And let's begin. So we're going to press play without any context. We're going to take a closer look. We'll get to the point where it's about here, 3/4 of the way done. You're that close to getting it done. And we'll see what your questions are. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right.
Yeah, all the farther I got. Of course, the song is still there. But... yeah, that song is actually the big reason why I stopped. I cannot get the copyrights for it. I can't get the author to let me use it. I mean, I can still put it out there. You know what I mean? I just won't. If I ever become monetized or something like that, I won't be able to claim anything from it. Any type of monetization that would come from it would go from him, which I mean, I'm fine with. But yeah, that song was the biggest hurdle with that.
The song is one of the difficulties.
Yeah.
But the lighting, the set, this is the White Rooster Productions.
Yeah. Yeah, that model. So I lost the actual White Rooster. It was an actual pet of mine. We raised him from an egg. I lost him. Oh man, almost a year ago now. Jeez. And that I sat down. I started modeling him. Like I wanted. It was my first time doing a character model, should we say? And so again, a wealth of information out there on how to model certain animals using Blender's hair particle system. But this time I'm scattering feathers. So the actual body of him, that was something I found from a different asset. It was a very low poly, not detailed asset. The body of him was something I found online, and I added big, medium, small. I added all that detail, the detail of the eyes, the details of the beak, details of the wattles. And if you notice, the wattles and all that stuff is animated. There's actually bones added to that, and they wiggle. Like I
Yes.
got to bake that, all those little animations. The feathers, same thing. Like tail feathers are they're all animated using an add-on called Wiggle Bones.
Yes.
Well, it was just like 10, $15 for that add-on. Well worth it. Buy it. Oh my gosh, as I say, a lot of time, a lot of detail put into that character. Probably 6 months took me to get to that point. Same thing with the robot. The robot is actual real Lego pieces. You are staring at individual Lego bricks modeled put together, just like in the real one is. I found the instructions online. That is a real thing you can go to the store and buy. I found the instructions on how to build it, like if you were to buy it, like how you assemble it, and I modeled the bricks, did the texturing. And right about the time I was finished, I learned about an add-on called Mecha Bricks, where you can download Lego's entire library.
Oh
Somebody
no.
downloaded the character, and there's even a Blender add-on for it where it'll texture it for you. And I'm like, get out of here, man! It was only like $10 or something like that. It wasn't even expensive for that add-on. Yeah, I spent all that time modeling that character, and I
Every
could have
single
just
piece.
downloaded it, you know. But yeah, all the individual pieces of him are animated. Um, one of the things I'm not too happy with him is it's a very dirty, dusty atmosphere. Boy, he's real clean looking. He's real shiny. But how do I put a texture over something that's 1,300 individual pieces? You know what I mean? So I haven't really found a solution to that challenge. The just animating him. Are you familiar with Chris Bailey, C. Bailey Film? He
Possibly.
he's somebody that's been very influential with me with learning how to do short films and just animations, camera motions in general. He has a tutorial series going on right now where he animates a two-legged robot creature. This took a lot of inspiration from that tutorial series of his, how to model it, how to rig it, how to make it move, and how you use Blender's animation side of bringing something like that to life. Yeah, there's a lot of work went into that. I really got to give Chris Bailey credit for that. Um, I threw the idea out to him of like in his short film sending him my character so it could just be like sitting on the ground somewhere in the background. You know what I mean? Just a little Easter egg or something like that. Uh,
Just to
but
confirm, his YouTube channel is C. Bailey Film?
see, Bailey, that's him right there. Yeah,
Got
he's
it.
got a lot. He's got like 30 some videos out there right now. You can buy his it's well worth it, by the way. If you buy his animation course, where a lot of the videos that are up on YouTube are edited. You don't get the full, like, he'll sit down for like an hour, hour and a half, and build the piece live in front of you. You see how he thinks, how he uses Blender, how he builds things, how he uses keyframes. A lot of keyboard shortcuts with Blender that are really handy to know. Well worth it. Recommend that course, by the way. So a huge shout out to him for the influence on that.
Excellent.
Um, the man, I've paid. I butcher his name, but he does the course alive. Pedro. I can't remember his name. I'll be sure to link it. But he did this animation course on just
That's
animation.
the French guy. He's a French
Ah,
dude.
yes, I
Yes,
know. Yeah.
yes, he is French. Yes, cool. I'm glad somebody knows who I'm talking about. But his tutorial series is what I use to animate the chicken, or even just how to set up and rig that. He talks a lot about again the big details, the medium details, and small details of animation.
Mm-hmm.
So like the waving feathers and the waddles and whatnot.
Second G.
Take a lot. And this is all information you can find. If you really want to learn this stuff, it's out there. I haven't. There has been very little I've needed to really figure out from scratch. Somebody else has figured out something or some part of it that I've been able to just find. It's just a matter of sitting down, typing into Google, and actually looking for it
Figuring
and
it
finding it.
out and learning it. Okay, so why haven't you finished this? What do you
So
think is missing other than the music?
yeah, I didn't storyboard this. There's a lot of fundamentals that I skipped, and so this is built around the song. And my first short film, it's this spaceship and this glass rooster ball. They're having like a little fight with each other. That was done without a storyboard. That was literally done with the song. And each individual scene I imagined in my head, and I just sat down and did it. Well, the problem is because I didn't have a storyboard, I didn't. I don't know how. I have kind of an idea of how I want it to end, but I don't really know how it's going to end. And it seems to drag. I'm not happy with a lot of things. And that's because I never sat down and storyboarded the story. I never in some very basic form drew it out to see what's this scene going to look like? What's that scene going to look like? And now because there's, this many beats goes on for, 3 seconds, there's this exact many frames. All these animations that I've done are tied to this exact song. So I don't have I kind of need to start over with a different song. And who knows, you'll probably tell a whole different story. but it was because I didn't storyboard it and because I didn't render it in a manner that gave me the control to use it or something else, I'm stuck.
Okay, that's very good. I've had this issue before, and I know what it means. And also, my next question goes on to, so to finish this, I guess you need a beginning, a middle, and an end. You need an input,
Correct.
you need a process, and you need an output.
Yeah.
Earlier, when we did these Q&As, I did a lot of workshops about story writing, the hero's journey, the monomyth,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of different concepts about story, and that it's the foundation for a lot of things. But you always have to start with a couple of questions, the needs and the wants. And since we have two protagonists, one is a secondary character, which is the rooster, and we have the principal character who has a clear curiosity. He's also mimicking the rooster and exploring and scanning. I wanted to ask you, have you thought about, or what does the robot want? And also, what does the robot need to do? From there, maybe we can find a clear end. Would you like to explore this a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. Because you're spot on. And this is why I'm kind of stuck. Is I don't. What is the point? You know what I'm saying? What is there? Usually, most stories involve somebody trying to do something, and these are just two characters that just so happenly bump into each other. Like, what is the interaction? Like, obviously, he's studying the rooster. That is something I wanted. That's something I wanted to tell with the story. But then what? He's
Did
studying the
your
rooster.
did
Is he
your rooster died?
in real life?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you love your rooster?
Um, that is a long story in itself. Yes, he's a pet. I love all my pets, and when I lose a pet, you know, chicken, whatever, it's sad, especially a pet that I've spent a lot of time and I've like I said, I raised him from an egg, and there's even a story behind where he came from, but that's a whole half-hour conversation in itself. But
Mm.
yeah, no, it was sad, and this kind of this character is kind of a throwback or kind of a memorial to that character. Now, the real White Rooster was very mean. He was not a nice guy, but I wanted him to be a nice guy. So like one of the things I was going to try to do was he was going to chickens dig at the ground. They dig up worms and stuff. I was going to have the rooster dig up a worm and give the worm to the robot because the mind of the rooster sees everything as another bird. So I was, and this is real life. That's actually how chickens think. Chickens think of you as another bird. They don't think of you as a human being or something different. So he's gonna, being a rooster, what roosters do is they help the hens. They're supposed to anyway. They help the hens dig up, look for food, and then when they find something, they call the hens, and the hens come running over. So I was gonna have the rooster dig up a worm and give the worm to the robot, and the robot was gonna be like, what do I do with this? What is this? I don't know. And you know, I was going to have that kind of interaction, kind of this silly thing, like they don't know what each other are, and they're going to kind of study each other, and Rooster's just going to do what he normally does, and the robot's going to be like, I don't know what to do, you know.
Why don't you just abduct the rooster and then you give it an end because you lost your rooster and you want to like give him you know, heaven, for not heaven, but you know what I mean, like an ending, like a sunset, like it has ended the cycle of his life in some
Yeah,
kind of metaphor or something,
right,
you know.
right.
You
Yeah,
can mix
that's good.
it
I
up
like
with
that.
your space art, you know. I don't know,
Mhm.
that could be a thing.
That's that. Absolutely, I love it.
All
Yeah,
right.
one of the endings I had was there's another character, by the way, that I have not introduced yet. I've spent a considerable amount of time modeling, and that is my cat. And one of the things I was thinking about doing, one of the endings I had planned was kind of a silly ending where it's this really cute kind of interaction between the robot and the rooster. But cats love laser pointers. And what's coming out of the robot's eye is a laser pointer. So the cat, it was just going to be this quick thing where the music's all playful and somber, and all of a sudden, you know, this cat jumps across, grabs the rooster, goes off screen, and then it just cuts. that was one of the endings I was planning, something kind of silly like that. Um, yeah, I just haven't made it to that point.
Okay. From what I'm listening, so what I'm going to do, usually when I get stuck with a story, I usually think about just the characters instead of the premise of the story. So if I think about the characters, then you can kind of create kind of an avatar or a particular NPC, I guess you could say, that starts to interact with one another automatically, and then the story unfolds in itself. So we have the central question, we have an arena, which is the barn, and we have the central question. No one knows who they really are, except for the rooster, but the rooster doesn't know who anyone else is. No one knows who they really are. The rooster doesn't know. Rooster doesn't know what everyone else is. Rooster doesn't know who everyone else is because he thinks that everyone's a bird. So he needs a closure to his existence with connection to the world. And the robot wants to know what he is, but he doesn't know why. And he also needs to know why he exists. So he starts to mimic the rooster. Maybe he's thinking that he is the rooster, and they both have a similar conflict. They don't see the world as they really are. So that third character that comes in and breaks the story with the laser pointer, and then they both run off kind of scared, and they both kind of red and white. One's mechanical, one is organic, but they both have the survival instinct to survive. Both of them want to survive. Then they both know that they are creatures that are alive and aware from that particular concept, just as Andromeda suggested to some regards. But like once you sort out, like, okay, what does the rooster want? What does the robot want, and why, from a bit of a background or present? And if you find out what their needs are, so for example, when you have a want, maybe what you need is not exactly what you want. So when you have that kind of conflict of, well, I need rest, but the character wants to play, this adds a central conflict to that, what the character's decisions are and what they want to do. If the rooster wants to feed the robot, but he needs to realize that that robot's not a chicken, then the chicken needs to, or the rooster needs to know or understand that the other character is actually something different. So depending on how you define your wants and needs, just on those two characters, based on the dynamics, you could re-edit some of these shots. We've got the intro shot, that's perfect. We see the rooster in there, scratching at the ground, perfect. He's doing the scratching, and then the robot walks in, does the scanning, and you see what the scanning does, and then they approach each other, and then the robot starts to mimic the other rooster a little bit, just a slight reordering of the shots. And then from there, you start to think, okay, so if the robot wants to know what he is and starts to mimic the chicken, and if the chicken thinks he's a rooster, but in reality, they need to be different or not, depending on their needs, you can start to throw in a push into the story, or a hook, or a pivot, or a climax or an anticlimax to make the story happen. But I can't give you the answers right now. This is up to you.
Yeah.
But you already have a lot of good shots. These shots are beautiful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. I'm actually not happy with them. I need to do more there's more compositing I want to do, and I've learned a lot about compositing since then. Like, instead of all this is done in Blender, by the way. There's a it's the footage is cut or should I say strung together in DaVinci Resolve, and there's a couple overlays here and there, but almost no color correction or anything like that. A lot of that is just right out of Blender. Blender's compositor did a lot of that for me. So sitting down, if I were to redo this, the rooster would have its own lighting, its own setup. The barn scene would have its own lighting, its own setup, and then the robot would have its own lighting, its own setup. And then that would also give me the ability to finally add that dirt texture to them. I can composite that. I can take a 2D image and put it over a 3D object and make it look dirty. So I would re-render most of these scenes. I kind of have to anyway if I'm going to change the song. It's funny too, Dre's. There was one ending I had in mind, but I didn't know if it was going to be appropriate. Another thing about roosters is, again, they see everything as hens. I can't tell you the number of times that my rooster will try to mate. He tries to mate with everyone and everything. That's just what roosters do. one of the ideas I had, I wasn't sure if it was like friendly for the audience or silly. I mean, it's silly, but it's kind of a sick sense of humor where the rooster is gonna be like, "Hey, hen, I'm horny now. I'm gonna jump on your back," and and that's how it would end.
And the
But
robot's like,
that
what? And he runs away. I'm not a rooster.
right, yeah, or where he struggles to get away, that type of thing. Yeah, that would actually that ending, or should I say that next scene would absolutely fulfill what you've written in front of me. That is something. I don't know. I need to think about this some more. You've really given me some things to really think about to pick this back up.
Yeah, it's mostly questions with more questions. But once you figure
Mhm.
that out, once you've defined your characters a bit more, then the story writes itself based on the central bits of context that you've given. But you can recycle a lot of the work that you've already done for the
Oh yeah,
particular story that you.
yeah.
Okay, well, White Rooster, with your big production, thank you for today. Thanks for your time and also sharing
Yeah.
about your life and how you work here, share your
Thank you
work-life
for
balance.
thank you for
Please has
having me.
shared quite good feedback on your piece as well. For example, the pacing of the shots, the rendering and the quality and things like that. He's mentioned that being an inspiration for it. I'm kind of drunk as mentioned. He's relating with the rooster as well, a bit more than he likes. He also mentioned something interesting about the story. Since the story is an open-ended one, he mentioned, "Please, robot, don't shoot the rooster. We don't know if the robot's hostile or not." So that
Yeah,
could be another thing.
I didn't want him to be a bad robot. I want him to play kind of the same character he does, and because that's the BD robot from
Mm,
Star Wars, and he's kind of this cute little pet like character, and I wanted him to maintain that persona. I didn't want him to be violent or anything like that. No
mm,
weapons on him.
that's good. So with that, well, it's so many things that you gotta keep working on through all the other things and priorities that you have. But I wanted to
Yep.
say thanks for your time today. Thanks for giving us context for all of your work, your methods, and also diving deeper into your quite extreme compositing working techniques with the post that you do while you're working with Blender. The reasons why you're not compositing in Blender is also was interesting. And I want to say thanks for everything that you've shared today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you invited me out beyond. I appreciate it a lot.
Excellent.
This has been great.
Cool.
Thank you for listening to me ramble for well beyond our time too.
Yeah, we hit 1 hour 17, so it was quite a long one today. But since it's happening every 2 weeks, I guess we can squeeze a little bit of a few more minutes every now and then. In 2 weeks' time, we have another special guest who has been someone that I've known through multiple years and has done a lot of amazing character art. I can't wait to interview him and present him to you over the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned to my social networks. Like and subscribe if you like this show. And in 2 weeks' time, I'll be teasing, or during the next 2 weeks, I'll be teasing their art and a little bit about what's going to happen. And I will see you next Friday in 2 weeks. Same time, same place. Thanks again, White Rooster. Your work is
Thank you,
great.
Dre. Thank you very much. You too.